More than 800,000 Americans have died from COVID-19. That's more than the entire population of North Dakota. More people have died from COVID in America than in any other country on earth. And 75% of the dead here were 65 or over. And that means 1 in every 100 older Americans has died in this pandemic. Turns out there were death panels, but from President Trump, not from President Obama. The question now is, will there be any legal accountability for those deaths? Because many of those people did not have to die. It was negligence. Some would argue criminal negligence. Trump knew how deadly the virus was all the way back in February of 2020, even as he publicly played it down.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
Millions of Americans got sick, some of them directly because of Donald Trump.
You had always suspected that you got it from the president. Is that right?
Well, the only reason I suspected it was because he was the only person who I didn't know his testing regimen. I was in close contact with. All the other people, we spoke about the fact that.
So did this confirm for you that you did, in fact, get it for the president?
Oh, I think it's undeniable.
And yet Trump has yet to face any consequences for his actions during the pandemic, and 800,000 Americans are dead, many of whom did not have to die. How do we just move on from that? Won't somebody be held responsible, legally responsible? Elie Mystal is a justice correspondent for The Nation magazine, and Dr. Peter Hotez is the co-director of the Texas Children's Hospital Center for Vaccine Development. He's also dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, and he's the author of Preventing the Next Pandemic. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Elie, let me start with you. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, he laid out the case against Donald Trump, a criminal case, with me recently. Have a listen.
I would have already been in the grand jury presenting Donald Trump's words to the American people as juxtaposed against Donald Trump's words to Bob Woodward. And ultimately, after a full, fair presentation to the grand jury, I would have asked the grand jury whether there was enough evidence to indict Donald Trump for an admittedly low level of homicide, negligent homicide or involuntary manslaughter.
Even if you think you can't go after Donald Trump, it's too hard, how can we not hold anyone criminally responsible for 800K dead?
Yeah, look, I'm Catholic. My people invented a conception of hell in order to have a place to put people like Donald Trump and his enablers who have led to this massive, unnecessary death. But that is a moral question. The legal question, the law is simply not very good at holding public officials accountable for their policy choices. And the monstrous thing that we have to wrestle with as a country is that allowing people to die of COVID was a policy choice by Donald Trump. It is now a policy choice by the Republican Party and various Republican governors around these United States. And when it comes to making that policy choice, it is hard for the law to kind of pierce the veil of that policy choice and get in there and hold them accountable. The accountability is supposed to be political in this case. That's not happening because of the nature of our polity at this point. And if there's additional kind of accountability, it should really be, we got to go talk to the people in Geneva, right? Because we are now kind of getting into the realm of crimes against humanity, much more so than something the American legal system is kind of designed to handle correctly.
Elie, hold that thought, and I will come back to you on that. I want to bring in Dr. Hotez. You calculated at the end of last month that about 150,000 unvaccinated people have died of COVID-19 this year since June alone. Who is to blame for that?
Yeah, this is exactly right. And there are almost no words to describe it. You know, we call it misinformation or disinformation, Mehdi. It's, I don't know what you call it, self-immolation or anti-science aggression. And this is people who've had the option to get vaccinated, could understand that they needed to get vaccinated and deliberately chose not to. Why? Because of the words of members of the United States Congress at the CPAC conference saying that vaccines nature, then they're going to take your guns and Bibles away. And as ridiculous as that sounds to us, a quarter of the nation believed it and needlessly lost their lives. It came out of the conservative news outlets, night after night on Fox News, discrediting vaccines. It came from a cultivated group of contrarian intellectuals or pseudo-intellectuals coming out of the far-right think tank who weave this false narrative about vaccines and other COVID prevention measures. This was deliberate anti-science aggression and out of authoritarian rule.
Ellie, Brazil's Senate has voted to recommend charges against their president, Jair Bolsonaro, for crimes against humanity for his handling of the coronavirus or mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, I'm not saying that Democrats should be calling for Trump to be sent to Geneva or to Hague or wherever it is. But I do wonder why the Democrats have not talked more about Trump's responsibility for a massive death toll. They're up against a party who went on and on about a handful of tragic deaths in Benghazi versus 800,000 dead, many of whom died on Trump's watch, many of whom died because of Donald Trump.
Look, I don't usually defend Democrats. That's not but they did try to impeach him twice. And sorry, they did successfully impeach him twice. Not for COVID. So maybe that's the next thing to go. But if you want to talk about Democrats, I think what we got to talk about is that it's interesting to me that Brazil has a Senate that's willing to hold its president accountable, and we do not have an attorney general that's willing to hold the former president accountable. When you're talking about what Glenn Kirshner is talking about, when you're talking about some of these more aggressive legal theories, we have to have a prosecutor. We have to have a United States Attorney General who is willing to take the fight to Trump. And we don't have that right now. I can't get Trump indicted for tax fraud. I can't get him indicted for election fraud. I can't get him indicted for obstruction of justice. I'm not done. I can't get him indicted for sexual assault. I can't get him indicted for sedition. I can't get him indicted for treason. And those are all easier legal arguments to make than the crimes against humanity for his COVID mishandling. So until we get a prosecutor who's willing to go to the mattresses against this man, he's going to continue to walk away free.
Depressing points, but fair points nevertheless. Dr. Hotez, there are some researchers who believe that the current death toll, we're reporting it's crossed 800,000. There are some who say that's an undercount and that the real number of deaths could be closer to 1 million. We may have even crossed the 1 million mark. Is that your view as well?
Yeah, because, so many times you had the paramedics come to the house and the individual had lost their lives. It was recorded as a sudden death event from a heart attack, but it could have been COVID-19. And look, we have to also stop talking about this like it's over. We're waiting for the latest Institute for Health Metrics evaluations coming out at the end of this week, but it's likely that 800,000 death is going to increase to more than 1 million by the end of Q1 2022. And again, it's almost going to be all people who are defiant of getting vaccinated. So that 150,000 defiant of vaccines is going to double to 300,000, 350,000. It is just a massive loss of life, all for showing allegiance to far-right extremism.
Yeah, it is deeply depressing to see hundreds of people still dying every single day from COVID-19. And yet we have columnists in the liberal media too saying, well, let's move on. COVID's over, and it's not over. And that's part of the problem, that we're not holding Trump to account because so many people just want to move on. I'm not going to move on this story. I want to hold him to account. Elie Mystal and Dr. Peter Hotez, thank you both for your time. Appreciate it. That is all in on this Monday night. I'm